Shoot, I sort of lost my train of thought there. I don't know why I had a question in my head and it just disappeared.
That's fine.
Shit. What the heck was I just going to ask you? You were talking about... Oh, okay, yeah, I remember.
Okay.
Hey everybody, welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name's Kevin Portelli, and I'm here again tonight, or this afternoon, again with our pal Kevin Cole, who's joining us for the second week in a row, although we're recording these back-to-back. But how you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for taking so much time out of your day here to chat some games earlier, and now we'll chat some of your games, and I guess beyond that, because you do far more than just games, and definitely far more than just video games as well, because you definitely get beyond the digital realm when it comes to games, which is one of the things I really want to pick your brain about the most, is your board tabletop game that's in development, I think, currently, Space Kings.
Yeah.
And really my only frame of reference for this, other than scoping out your stuff on your itch.io page and whatever, and scrolling through the Space Kings kind of website and whatnot. But I did listen to a couple of your podcasts of Pretend Friends. It's been a long time, but I believe you guys were playing Space Kings in that podcast, and it was just really interesting having no real frame of reference for the game other than like a really light, glossing over the surface of it. It was really cool to kind of listen to that, because I've listened to some other kind of D&D themed podcasts or whatever that kind of base around like a tabletop game or whatever. So this was kind of interesting to be like, I didn't even really know that there was like this world of indie tabletop games, and there is a huge world of them.
Oh,
but
for
Space
sure.
Kings seems really exciting. It seems like there's quite a bit of quite a few folks that are excited for this one.
Oh yeah. We did that Space Kings Kickstarter a long time ago, and because of the pandemic and because we all have other responsibilities, it's taken us a super long time to get the actual Space Kings book out.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people listening to this are a good portion of the people listening to this who are like, oh, he's going to talk about Space Kings. Are going to ask for some kind of explanation, but we've just been working on Space Kings for the past 2 years. I think 2 years, yeah, for the past couple of years, and it actually started even before that. When I quit my job to make video games, I ended up moving back to my hometown, and I started a D&D group with a bunch of my friends, and a couple things happened where D&D 4th edition was a little too complicated for us, and there were a few too many people at the table, and we all kind of wanted to drink, and we also wanted to play every week. So we needed something a little more streamlined to make that work. And I'm a serially low roller when it comes to dice. I don't know what it is, but I cannot roll high on a 20-sided dice to save my life. So I made up the system that uses playing cards, and I started it. I made a character sheet, and I told my friends to fill it out, and we'd be doing a lot of fantasy. So I'm like, this is going to be space themed, because we're getting away from fantasy, we're getting away from dice. We're gonna start our own thing, and I'm a big shot game designer now. I can make a tabletop game. This was a few months after I had quit my job, and that was sort of the start of Space Kings. And we just played it for 6 years. We just played it every week, and I'd add on little parts of it. My friends would add on little parts of it. Sometimes I'd host and run the game. Sometimes other people would step up and host, and I'd learn even more about the game from having other people do it.
Yeah.
And then I met my friends Paul Ritchie, Nick Murphy, and Josh Henderson, and I was like, we should do a tabletop podcast because they're really popular. And and we could do it, but really fun. And they're like, yeah, but we don't want to do a lot of math. And I'm like, I have something that doesn't use a lot of math. So we broke out the playing cards, and we started recording Pretend Friends.
When you're saying playing cards, you're just talking a regular deck of standard 52 cards or whatever?
Yep. I have a pack on my desk right now.
A nice Sriracha pack, I see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually 54 playing cards, because the ones you're concerned about are The face cards and the ace cards are successes, so they're the cards you want to get.
Okay.
The rest of the cards are just sort of neutral, don't really do anything. And the jokers are these wild twists of fate. When you flip a joker, the host kind of gets to take control of your action, and rather than like a straight up success or failure, it becomes maybe a wacky catalyst for more trouble to happen.
Okay.
This was sort of inspired by a lot of the improv games we'd play, because in college and high school, a lot of me and my friends we were part of improv groups, and we'd do a lot of improv shows and like play improv games and stuff like that. And that was the part of D&D I always liked, was doing like wacky improv and voices and, you know, making my friends laugh.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it'd be funny if like there were more opportunities, because in a lot of games in D&D, if you roll a 1, like we kind of let the dungeon master go wild with what happens. Like, you know, your sword breaks, or like you trip and fall, or rocks fall and everyone dies or whatever. And I was like, I want more chaos in my games. So the jokers became just the blank check for the DM to go nuts. And so like we played Space Kings on this podcast, Pretend Friends, and people started listening to it and they really liked it. Paul, Nick, and Josh do a web show called Continue, and that had a lot of that has a lot of really awesome fans, and they all a lot of them came over and started listening to Pretend Friends, and now it kind of has its own community, and that's really cool. And and all the while we were doing it, they're like, when's the book coming out? And I'm like, one sec. And so I spent like the first 2 years of Pretend Friends, I was just writing the book in the background. And then once I had finished the manuscript, I got my team together and we did a Kickstarter. And then a little thing called the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And suddenly it became a lot harder. So, and for a little while, we didn't think we'd have a postal service under a certain president, and that was
right.
That was a problem for people trying to ship a book,
physical game of some kind.
Yeah. So in between, like, surviving, we've just been working on this book, and hopefully, like, this year, it's all going to come to fruition. The Space Kings book is going to come out. Our backers are going to be super happy. Like, it's all happening in 2022. So that's going to be really, really amazing for us. But that's sort of the story of Space Kings so far. It was a little tabletop project that I made for my friends, and then it kind of grew semi unexpectedly. Like, I hoped it would grow, but like we've really seen some success with the Kickstarter, and everyone seems really amped to play it. So and people like, while we were doing the early episodes of Pretend Friends, people were figuring out how to play the game and just like making up their own rules and playing it.
Oh, that's so cool.
Which I thought was super awesome. So,
yeah, that's got to be such a good feeling as like a designer. Like, hey, this must sound so compelling to these people that like they want to try to figure it out, even if like it sounds so fun. And that's even got to be a little bit of a surreal feeling to number one, have a podcast like based around a game that you made, but also based around a game that like kind of like almost came into its own through the podcast in a way. I mean, I know you said you were playing it for like 6 years before that, so it's not like it just happened overnight, but it maybe just gave you that extra kick of like, hey, like my friends and I have a lot of fun playing this. Like maybe other people would have a lot of fun playing this too if it was available for them, One
of the big issues with it was actually keeping it simple, because we had been playing it for so many years. And one of the big draws of it is that it's not like Dungeons and Dragons. You don't like really have levels or anything like that. Your characters kind of can shift around a bit, but they mostly stay the same. And that's by design, because I wanted something that could disappear into the improv and the acting and stuff like that. And I think Space Kings does that pretty well, while having some really like strong mechanics happening under it. But when you make a really simple game, the challenge is like what do you sell? Like I feel like I invented Foursquare or something like that. And it's like, yeah, anyone with a deck of cards can play Space Kings. You you don't really need much. You just kind of need like the push. Like it's like
you need the framework and yeah.
So
but sometimes those are the most fun games, like when you're just like playing some random I can't even like just in my living room as a kid, like keeping up a balloon up in the air with my brother, like how long can we keep it up, and just counting. And it's like I have more fond memories of that than, I don't know, doing something that I would, in my mind at the time, would seem more like memorable and more awesome. But at the same time, I more just remember, diving around my living room with a balloon.
Yeah. And like the direction, and we knew that going in writing the book, and the direction we decided to do was to help people more with the improv part and with how to think on your feet and how to plan. Like it's a lot of the pressure is on the host to sort of mediate between the chaos and to have like ideas and to like know how to take feedback from their players and work it back into the game. And we had kind of developed little skills for doing that. Like we had something called the loose ends list, where like, if we introduced like, a character who was like an elevator operator or something, and like the players started talking to him too much, and then they leave, and the elevator attendant is just like, well, I have no other life now. We're like, oh no, I think the elevator attendant's going to be on the loose ends list. Like, who knows when we'll see him again? Maybe we'll throw him in. And then like, I don't know, like months or years later, we'd be like, they'd be in some desperate scenario, and they're like, the elevator's broken, the space station's going down, no one's going to help us. And they're like, I know one person who can help us. And then go to the loose ends list, the elevator attendant from 3 years ago.
Oh, that's amazing.
So,
and I love too, because I love too, because like you said, like you and your friends had developed like ways to kind of host it. But I feel like in a lot of cases with games like this, and being the fact, like I've never played a bunch of D&D in my life. I've only kind of experienced it tangentially, like being in the room with friends who were playing. Mm-hmm. And it's always seemed like, or at least I've felt kind of at arm's length, like this seems like too much for me. But the fact that like you're giving like the DM essentially like the tools to kind of like almost encourage the improv, and like they're usually, whoever's going to be the one DMing is going to be the one that's trying to like essentially sell their friends on playing this game with them. At least that's my experience with playing board games or tabletop games. There's somebody who's like, no, you just got to learn. Once you learn, it'll be fun. I promise. And like, but if you kind of take some of that stuff out of the other player's hands and just have it available for the DM to kind of, navigate the nuances of the game and just let everybody else kind of have fun. Not that they're just sitting there passively, but I don't know. I think that's a really smart design. Like, you just give the DM a lot of control.
Yeah, one of the things that was super important for us was to have a character sheet that was really intuitive to fill out. And Brian Shepard, our artist for this project, just absolutely poured so much time and attention into the character sheet, where there are little rules, reminders on the character sheet of how to build your character. It flows really nicely. Like, you just kind of start at the top and work your way down to the bottom. And or if you really want, you can start your way at the bottom, work your way up to the top. Like, it's really intuitive to read, and it's really intuitive to make a character. You don't really need a whole episode or a whole session to make a character. You can just kind of be like, I kind of want to be a strong guy who nobody really respects, but he's got a heart of gold. Be like, okay, brawn, no presence, and a little bit of charm. There you go. There's your character. Okay. And then the rest is just playing that character up, like finding out what that character's shtick is, and like staying true to your concept, and like having that character evolve over time. Like, the mechanics are there to reinforce the improv, but the improv kind of comes first. Like, what you can bring to the game as far as a personality and your own creativity is always going to be more important than me like making you, like, I don't know, do too much math or whatever.
Yeah, and that's actually funny you say too much math, because I was just going to ask, like, so how do you go from designing something like Haque, which I believe maybe came into fruition as this is like a video game roguelike with, that's one of the things, as much as I love playing, physical board games, I do love like the few games that I've experienced that are kind of like, maybe they're not even a real board game, but that are even like a deck building roguelike or something. Like, the fact that I don't have to physically like shuffle my cards and bend them up, or just do all the math of like how these power ups, or even playing like Magic the Gathering. I gotta have all my Mancala beads and stack them on top of my cards to remember like what's tilted, and what there's just so much stuff to keep track of. Where like a game like Haque, it's kind of just doing it all for you. You just have to keep track of what you want to do.
Yeah.
So do you feel like
I just find it really interesting because in a way, a turn-based roguelike plays a lot like a board game. I mean, it really does, especially Haque.
Yeah. I would say if I've learned anything from developing both a tabletop game and video games is that there are some things that video games do super well that's really annoying to do in tabletop games. And there's some things that tabletop games do super well that's absolutely impossible to do in a video game. And just sort of learning the differences between the two has been really helpful because I think for a while it looked like D&D was going to be more and more influenced by video games. And it still is.
Yeah.
Because D&D influenced video games, and then like the video game influence kind of went back to D&D, and there's some really mechanically rich stuff happening in the D&D sphere that deserves like it deserves like the hype it gets. But at the same time, I think I think having worked on both, it's just I want to emphasize what's good about tabletop games when I make a tabletop game. And what's good about tabletop games are the people around you and the stories you make together. It's not so much like these really intense, like having to go to a table to see if you can wield a halberd or whatever. Like,
right.
And in a game, if the computer goes to a table to see if I can wield a halberd, I'm like, this is really immersive and beautiful and good. like they're just with Haque especially, like having so many little pieces to fiddle with is why I love it's why I love making roguelikes in general. It's just fun to get like really deep down and be like, okay, here we have a sword, which is, the basic weapon. It's got like medium attack, medium accuracy, medium speed. Like it's the go-to weapon that everything's concerned with. But take down that power a little bit and like up that speed or up that accuracy, and now you got a knife. And it weirdly feels that way, even though you're clicking the same buttons and you're like looking at two things. You're like, yeah, I get the difference, but it's like almost like feeling the weight in your hands. Like maybe that's giving like roguelikes a little too much credit for just like being things where numbers move around or whatever. But
no, but I totally feel what you mean, and especially with Haque, like even there's not that much animation going on, but there's like enough to it feels really impactful. Like especially with the sound design, I really like the sound design in the game a lot. And the music as well. And I think that's something that you do with all of your games. I know it's not your music per se, but I want to say it's Joe Keneally.
Joe Keneally, yeah.
Correct name?
Yeah, Joe Keneally does the music for all my games, and he's absolutely incredible.
Incredible and very off the beaten path. I don't know how else to say it, but like it's very much like, for example, like when I first booted up Haque, like on the menu screen, when I'm on the title screen, it's like, oh, this music feels like what I would expect to see from this game. It's kind of chiptune-y, little, kind of lo-fi chiptune-y kind of feel. But then like when you go into the first dungeon or first level, it's kind of like this like bluesy, like swampy guitar. Like it's almost like a little bit like sloppy kind of. Like it almost sounds like someone just like noodling around on guitar a little bit on that first track. But it sets the mood like you're on this like whimsical adventure, and then you got the old man talking shit to you and like just like all these weird cryptic but like really funny, like I don't know, it's really hard to nail that sense of humor in a game too, and for it to actually translate and be funny. And I found myself like laughing out loud on numerous occasions whenever the old man would interrupt me. But it's not just in Haque, it's in all of your games that you've worked on. It's like even in like Bazooka Panic, it's like this run and gun, hop and bop, roguelike platformer, but at the same time, you just kind of have these chill vibes going on. But it doesn't feel like, it's not like, oh, I'm choosing this to clash specifically and be like juxtaposed to what's going on. It still feels like it fits.
Yeah, the way Joe and I work, I think, is really interesting because most of the time Joe doesn't really like see the game until it's done.
Interesting.
I'll try and send him screenshots or whatever, but most of the time it's just like a text message where I'm like, hey, I'm making a game. The vibe is kind of like this. I need something for a level and maybe an alternate for like a more intense version of that level, and then a boss and then a title and maybe a credits. And it's like, it's usually like those same like 5 requests over and over again. And he's like, cool, I've been listening to a lot of like folk music, or I've been listening to a lot of like minor protest songs from like the 1800s, or I've been, listening to like a lot of German synth or something like that. And I'll be like, we can totally make that work. Like for Outfoxed, which I think is one of...
that was the next one I was going to bring up.
Yeah. That was one of my 2020 year of games. We actually made that game based on the suggestions of my Patreons. And
cool.
One of my patrons suggested funk. That was their one-word suggestion. I was like, Joe, you think you can do funk? And he's like, oh, I'm going to do funk.
And it's very funky. That game has so much. We actually just recently, probably like 4 or 5 weeks ago, we played it in our indie game book club.
Oh, nice.
That we do every week. We pick like 5 free-to-play games on itch.io every week, and then our Discord, like handful. But there's not a ton of people that dig into them every week, but I know a lot of the crew in there really enjoyed Outfoxed a lot. It was just like, it's just like a nice short and sweet little adventure game, but at least for me, it kept me like, I want to play this again. Like I actually did get a run where I stole every piece of like treasure and stuff in the Duck's mansion or whatever.
Did you get all the wallets?
Wallets?
All right, so
can you pickpocket the guards?
Every guard is carrying a wallet, and it's the hardest thing to do in that game. I don't think I've gotten a full wallet run yet.
It is not an easy game, and it's such a cool like little take on like it's basically like this top down stealth game, like kind of there's a little bit of scrolling I think, but it's essentially like one floor plan, like top down floor plan of a mansion, and it's so cool. It's got so much style, and it is so funky. And it really like that funk like drives the energy of the game. It really does. Yeah,
like the sneaking track that like explodes into the you've just been seen track. Like that was one of the most challenging games to make in the 2020 year of Super Try games. Just because I had to learn so much. I'd never made a pure stealth game before. I don't do too many top down games.
You do a lot of side scrolling, unless it's like Haque or something where it's more like turn based, I guess.
Yeah, I don't do too many like top down action games. And the other thing was I had to like learn a little bit more about like patrol AI and like giving all the guards little routes to run, and like it was a lot, but like I'm really, really proud of Outfoxed. I'm super glad that you guys have fun with it. So
yeah, it's honestly all those games, and it's kind of blowing my mind that was 2020 that you were doing that. I was thinking it was last year, but Jesus, man, where does the time go? But what? So I know you mentioned that was kind of like more of like a personal challenge. Like some of them were game jams, but was that maybe inspired a little by like what Sock Pop was doing? I know they've been doing like the game a month thing for quite some time. And then obviously I've raved about the games from Punk Cake Delicio and ad nauseum on the podcast at this point, but they've kind of jumped on that train as well with like a Patreon. They're doing a game every month for the most part. Was that something that was like inspired a little bit by that? Was it just kind of like a personal challenge, especially with, I know COVID didn't hit right at the beginning of that year, but close enough.
Well, we had done, game jams before. We did the GMTK jam a few times. That's where Elsewalker comes from.
Nice.
And, it was always like really satisfying to have, more games in our catalog. And I hadn't released too many games since Haque came out. And in 2020, I was like, I'm doing a lot of podcast and tabletop stuff, but I'm not doing as much like video game dev stuff as I want to be doing. And I was just kind of trying to figure out a way to like, make this Patreon where I could be paid for my time to work on these games. And that way I could assure that making video games would be part of my life, because it was kind of getting eaten up by all the podcasts I was working on. And I was like, I didn't really quit my job to be a podcaster, even though I love doing podcasts. And even though like I do quite a few of them, I was like, this is kind of like consuming my life, which is a weird problem to have, to be like, I'm very like, it's a weird problem to be like, oh no, this fun thing that I do is taking over my life, when I wanted this other fun thing I do to take over my life.
Well, but also I do think it starts to potentially, especially if you're getting away from the thing that you really want to be doing as well, if it's eating into that time, I think then you can start to get a little bitter about the thing you're doing, that even if you are enjoying it, you're like, but it's like now it starts to feel more like work and a little more like work over time, when it was initially just like a fun thing to keep in touch with your buds, you know?
Yeah. So doing the game a month thing, that was important for me to sort of balance out these two pillars of my life and the two pillars of my income, kind of. So, you know, tying that to the Patreon and making all these games and making a big spectacle of it, like, I guess it was a business decision, but it was more like I want to retake my game dev time decision. And it was a lot of work to make one game a month.
I bet, yeah.
And then, so we started that in January of 2020, and then, you know, 2 to 1.5 months later, the, you know, pandemic pops off. And, I was like, well, this kind of works out, because I was going to spend this year chained to my desk anyway, so.
Right. It's kind of in the cards. Worked out in a sort of one small positive out of the pandemic situation, you know?
Yeah.
You know, as obviously never would want it to happen, but it's like, hey, at least I could really go all in on this project that I was committed to already.
Yeah. And like, you know, now my time is, you know, pretty, I like the split of my time now between working on the Space Kings book, working on video games, and working on podcasts. Like, I feel like I found a nice balance, but I don't know if I would have gotten there without doing the game a month thing, because that sort of increased my reach a little bit. And it, you know, having the monthly Patreon money really helped me finally move out of my parents' house.
So with like the Patreon stuff, like you went from doing the game a month, and I believe you still have that Patreon going. Did you find it like kind of awkward to transition out of that? Like, hey, you're supporting me and I'm not going to be, you know, doing these regular releases like I was before. I know you're still working on stuff, obviously.
Yeah, but I found it super awkward. But I don't think my patrons did. They were all super supportive of me, and they were all really like proud of me for finishing up like that year of games, like for keeping my promise. And when I sort of explained to them that, hey, I'm not going to do a game every month in 2021. I'm going to, because I feel like I've explored this space. Like one, I'm tired. Two, I feel like I've explored this space, and I know what a monthly game by me looks like now. There's nothing really here to do. Like, I want to try seeing what a 2-month game looks like, or a 3-month game. But I promise, like, once a month, you'll get something to download, something to play. Like, there'll be something new. So I really liked the last game I did for December in 2020, which was Bazooka Panic. And I was like,
I like it as well.
I was like, I think this game has legs. I think this game is really good. And I know it's going to be a big project to like turn this into like a retail level thing. But I think I could be really happy if I, if I did that journey, and it'd be nice to kind of work on it at my own pace. And like, I'll still do the occasional game jam. I released at least 4 games last year, if you don't count Bazooka Panic, which was a lot of my work last year. And I feel like the secret to overcoming the awkwardness, as it always is just communication. I was like, look, the Patreon's changing a little bit. We're gonna try doing new games and stuff like that. And most people were thrilled. Like, most people are just like, I'm happy you're making stuff, and I'm happy I get to help you out.
Like, I love what you're doing already, and I would love to see it on a bigger scope. Like, I'd love to see something that I can purchase from you, or that other people can purchase after, it being supported or whatever.
And it's a lot of work to overcome the nervousness that comes from people supporting your work monetarily, because you think that the person who gives you like $50 a month is going to be like all up in your business, having thoughts about every single thing you put out. They're not. They have other important things to do. The person that gives you like $1 a month might like be like, hey, you should do this, or like they might be a little more vocal than the $50 a month. Like, it's so wild to see like folks on Patreon who like give me all this money, and then they're like, yeah, just do whatever you want. I don't care. I like what you do. That's why I'm giving you money. And I'm like, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it is like, the only thing I've been unemployed for quite some time, and I've been saying forever now, I'm like, the first things I'm doing, I do have my Punk Cake Patreon, and that's the only thing I have at the moment. And I'm like, I'm doing Sock Pop and Super Try as soon as I am like reemployed and have some income coming in again. Because it does feel really good. Like, for example, the game that just came out recently from Punk Cake, it's called Scavenger of Duna Mini. Ooh. And I really was kind of, like, they were showing off GIFs in the Discord and, like, early gameplay and stuff as it was in development. And I was like, it's kind of like a match 3 Wario's Woods kind of game, puzzler. And I was like, I don't know if this one's for me. It looks a little too complicated. I'm not loving the style that they're showing off so far, and like just wasn't super into it. But I was like, but it still feels cool to like support that. It's like a $4 a month Patreon, so it's hardly anything, and I get a game every month. So it's like, even if it strikes out, it's like I want to see what they do next. And it ended up being like, the more I've played it, it actually is probably my game of the year for 2021.
Oh,
like
wow.
Because it's like a match 3 puzzler, kind of the Wario's Woods style, so a little bit of light platforming, I guess, going on, but it's also a tower defense game at the same time. Like you're like taking the garbage and scraps that you're matching, building tower blocks out of those scraps that you're harvesting and whatever, and then you have to create generators and batteries. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's
like one of the craziest games.
I've seen you post about it, and it always looks so chaotic and weird and cool. I want to check that one out.
It's really awesome. And yeah, it's so cool because, again, like the next game that they're working on seems like another one that's not so much up my alley. It's called Shroomkatect. And it's like, it looks kind of more like Animal Crossing, Minecraft kind of gameplay where you're like crafting, but it just looks so cool and unique. I'm like, even if this ends up not being for me, I want to just support people that are like putting passion and like pouring, just making stuff that they want to make and really putting a lot of love and care into it. And again, even when it's not for me, it shows. And it's like, I want that stuff to exist. We were talking earlier about like content versus like actual like material. And this is not content. This is something that is like coming straight out of someone's heart. Yeah. And I want to support that if I can,
There's like a local kind of quality to supporting a small game dev where like, It just feels like a closer, better relationship where, folks are more willing to try things from, that has like an actual person that they know information about. Like, I try and put myself out there as much as possible by being on podcasts and making podcasts and like writing blogs. Like when I finally, after 8 years of doing this, when I finally moved out of my parents' place, I wrote like I made sure to tell everyone who is currently giving me money. Like I made sure to tell my Kickstarter people, and I made sure to tell my Patreon people that you made this possible. Thank you so much. Like it's important for people to know that like these little donations can change people's lives and they can cause art to exist in the world. Like I think a lot of game devs are nervous about putting themselves out there, but honestly, I think knowing the person who makes your art makes you love that art even more.
Oh, totally. It's it's like with music or anything. If you feel like you can relate to the artist a little bit, or you like the lyrics, like with other forms of art, like movies and whatever. There are those tangible things that you can just kind of latch onto and relate to. But with a game, sometimes it can if it's like a story-driven adventure or whatever. But if it's just like an arcadey romp, if you don't really know the person behind it, the personality might not shine through. But I don't know, I find that to be super interesting. To like just how much like of an individual's like, I don't know, psyche or something. You get like a little insight into somebody when you play one of their games, I think.
Yeah And I don't know, I love playing like modern stuff. I love playing stuff made by huge teams, but like some of like the most touching art I've consumed is like, like going to one of Joe Keneally's shows and hearing him play a new song. And then after he gets off stage, giving him a big hug and being like, hey, I like that new song. I miss that guy too. Like it's really powerful knowing like the person who makes your art and knowing where that comes from. And if you can't have like a friend IRL who makes art that you can be like obsessed with, like I want you to get kind of that feeling when, you know, you read my dumb tweets and listen to my stupid voice on a podcast and then play my games and be like, yeah, that shit reeks of Kevin.
No, that's awesome. And it definitely does. But obviously I don't know you incredibly well or anything, but I mean, it definitely, like what I was mentioning with like Haque and even the way you're implementing like Joe's music, for example, it still feels like it's got, because I've kind of attached you as like the brand of Super Try, or like the face of Super Try in a way, even though I know there are other people involved. I'm kind of like, that just feels like it comes from Kevin. Like if I all of a sudden played a game of yours that was like pure chip tunes everywhere, and like I'd be like, what's going on? Did Kevin and Joe have a falling out? What's going on here? You know, it's like I really like knowing that, even not knowing it, but knowing it just adds even a little more. And I know you even mentioned that like the Super Try crew, a lot of you are like friends going back to like high school and stuff. So even that's just like, just knowing, hey, Kevin's got to be a good guy. I'm not really friends with my friends from high school anymore. If you're keeping in touch, it's like, I don't know. It's just like you get it. You get a good feel for somebody.
Yeah, my high school is super weird. And it's very weird that my connections to my high school friends matter this much in my professional life. But
they're super talented too.
Yeah. You know, a lot of the games from 2020, we did a couple that were written by Hadley St. Clair. And they are also the editor for the Space Kings book. And
oh, cool.
Yeah, they've been super helpful to this whole thing. Brian Townsend is the layout guy for the Space Kings book. He's a friend from high school. Joe Keneally, friend from high school. Brian Shepard, who does art for Super Try on occasion, and also all of the art and the character sheet for the Space Kings book. He's been my best friend since middle school.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Yep.
And you guys, I'm assuming, grew up with like the passion of games and whatnot. So to be able to kind of share that and create stuff together, I mean, that's just such a, even me from the outside looking in, I'm like, man, that's cool. So I can only imagine how it feels like being a part of it.
Yeah. I really, really cherish my friends, even the ones who, you know, don't help me earn a paycheck. even my friends who are in the Space Kings, test group that I've known for like my entire life, and even the ones who just like play Magic with me on the weekend, who have like jobs and families and stuff. But they're like, I love that we can still play Magic the Gathering together, like we were in high school. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't really have to change.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, great to hear that there's just like a whole crew of an awesome community behind everything happening at Super Try over there.
I'm really, really lucky.
Yeah. So what do you feel like other than like Space Kings, and it sounds like you're still working away on Bazooka Panic, and is that kind of the main focus of Super Try at the moment?
This month, I kind of got wrapped up in making another roguelike.
You were making that mobile thing. That's right.
Last year, I made a game for the Double Clicks. They're a folk nerd band.
Cool.
And they just made a musical, and they wanted to make a game to promote the musical. And Laser Weber, one of the Double Clicks, and I went to high school together. Wouldn't you know?
All those connections, man. I just needed to go to this high school, man. That's hilarious.
Yeah. And so we worked together to make this game to promote the musical. But they were like, hey, this can run on a phone, right? And I'm like, oh, I've never made anything that can run on a phone. Can I make a thing that runs on a phone? Turns out I am able to make a thing that runs on a phone. And then I kind of forgot that I knew how to do that. And I was like, there's some good roguelikes that are playable on a phone. But what if I made a roguelike that was browser playable on a phone? Because I'm not gonna like jump into the app store. Like most of my, like almost all of my games except for Haque and Space Kings, like my two big major ones, are free. Like most of the games I make are totally free. And I'm like, it'd be kind of fun if like, kind of like Wordle, if you could just like go to a website and like load up a roguelike and start playing it. So I started working on this game for this like roguelike game. And I wanted to design around the touchscreen, because I don't play a lot of phone games, but like the ones that have like like the little D-pad and the buttons on the screen.
Get that shit out of here, man.
It never really worked for me, and I thought that's kind of what they all were. But
me too, yeah.
It turns out it's a really fun design space to work in if you just like design for the actual touchscreen. Just be like,
yeah,
don't get the controller out of your mind and just design around the touchscreen. So learning how to do that is pretty fun, more fun than I thought it would be, and also removed a little bit of snobbery from me around mobile games. I'm more like, oh, okay, yeah. There's some, and I like Super Brother Sword and Sorcery, and I love Florence, and there's some amazing mobile games out there. But I'd never been like, that's the kind of game I'm going to make. So this has been a fun thing to explore.
And like the roguelike format, like I think we kind of touched on this earlier, but I know I kind of like, there was one game specifically that I was playing one time. I think it's called Streets of Red. And it's kind of like a beat 'em up arcade roguelike, but it really like, so you get like a currency in the game as you kill enemies, and you can either use that at the end of a level to buy like an upgrade or perk, or if you die, you can actually like spend those coins, and it keeps going up each time you die, how much you have to spend to like respawn. And in my head, I was like, man, this really is like a lot of these roguelikes with permadeath are really recreating that feeling of like pumping quarters into an arcade machine and like one more try. And so I really think on mobile, like, because like, again, like not all, some roguelikes take, a few hours to play through a session or whatever, but some are like 5, like Nuclear Throne might be 30 seconds for me, if I might die like that. So it's like, the idea of like, oh, a short little kind of more puzzly focus, like you're thinking it doesn't have to be an action game basically. And roguelikes, I just feel like you can layer so many interesting mechanics and like puzzly, but strategy, like, I don't know. I feel like there's so much potential there in such a small space.
And part of it is just like, there's this like scene in Adventure Time where like Finn is like in a dungeon and he's like, monsters, traps, swords, treasure, I'm in my element. And like that's how I feel. Like just a dungeon is my comfort zone. Like a really video gamey high fantasy dungeon is where I want to be, and being able to like make those spaces, like, just, this is why I make games. Like I feel like I found my purpose when I can make these little dungeons. So
nice.
Yeah,
I'm really excited to see more of not only this mobile, web-based roguelike thing, but again, I'm kind of similar to you, like with the touch controls. Like, not that I play a ton on mobile, but I've recently been playing a ton of games that only control with like the mouse, and you're just kind of tapping around, like the equivalent of just touching around on a touch screen. And I really enjoy that experience a lot more than I ever thought I would. Again, not being much of like a PC gamer, but I'll hook up like my laptop HDMI to my TV, lay back in my recliner, and have like the mouse on the armrest, and I'm just sitting there, playing Townscaper or something, and just relaxing.
Yeah, like it's a great relaxation thing, because like I like to have a beer, and like when I did the controls for Haque, I made sure it was playable with one hand, so like you could have like a glass of whiskey or a glass of wine or a beer or something, and like just kind of click through and play. And Haque is a little too much work to bring to mobile, so I figured I'd just sort of start with something a lot simpler and start making that for the browser.
Nice. Yeah, and for what it's worth, Haque plays great with a gamepad as well. Like, I played with the mouse for a very long time, and then I switched over to gamepad, and I was like, man, this works really well, which sometimes it can be overwhelming for those types of games, like just remembering all the buttons, but felt pretty intuitive to me.
Yeah, my goal with Haque was always to make, the turn-based roguelike a little more... I guess accessible. That word has a lot of different meanings, but I wanted people to feel at home when they played it. Like, if you like playing with the keyboard's open to you. If you're used to playing all your games on a controller, so am I. We're gonna have that for you. And if you want to just play it with a mouse and have a beer, then you can do it that way too. And that was. I'm really happy with how Haque sort of became. It doesn't feel like a casual roguelike. I'm sure there's some hardcore folks who would put it in that category because it is possible to win a game of Haque. But I wanted Haque to be sort of like an ambassador game to, the net hacks and the powders and the kind of more like crusty, difficult, like true graybeard roguelikes. Like, I wanted people to be like, well, I really liked Haque. what was it like? What was it based on? Like, what was it going off? And then having this whole new genre to explore. I thought that was a really appealing way to design an ambassador game like that.
That's a good way to put it too, because it's a little snappier than some of those more like traditional roguelikes. And I'm just realizing we didn't even talk about Powder on the last episode. You just brought it up. I was like, Jesus, I wrote it down. I didn't even mention it.
Next, have me on again. I'll probably still be obsessed with Powder.
Beautiful. We'll definitely do that. Yeah, but yeah, I totally agree, because for me it was kind of like Downwell and Enter the Gungeon were the two games that kind of got me into the roguelike genre.
Yeah.
Obviously, those aren't like anything like a traditional roguelike, but it just kind of opened my eyes. Like, oh, this is like, even just learning about Rogue, the original, like it's like, oh, this is what like all these games are kind of pulling from this core. Like basically just implementing this permadeath mechanic and buffs and power-ups and just kind of throwing it into any kind of genre, basically.
Yeah, one of the best reviews I ever got for Haque was someone who loved Binding of Isaac. And they're like, this game is great because it's like Binding of Isaac, but I have a child now, and so I can't be glued to my screen, and like it's kind of annoying to pause and unpause Binding of Isaac, but like with the turn-based thing, I can just like walk away and nothing really changes. So this was great to play as a new parent, and I'm like, that's so awesome, because I never thought of it that way, because I'm coming at it from this perspective of there were roguelikes that were freeware back in the day, and then game devs like took that formula and made it actiony, and then I took the actiony stuff and I made it turn-based again. But some folks are like, I came in on like the actiony roguelike and I have no idea what came before that, and this is a cool evolution. And I'm like, I thought it was a devolution. I thought I was going backwards. So I don't know. It's just, video games are cool. I love people with new perspectives on video games. I wish the roguelike community was slightly more welcoming to all of these kids who post on r/roguelikes being like, I really love, Slay the Spire and Binding of Isaac. What kind of games would you guys recommend? And they're like, none here. Go to.
Yeah, it's like, you don't need to gatekeep. Like, just give someone another recommendation. Like, it doesn't, even if you don't consider it a roguelike or roguelite or whatever you want to call them, like, who cares? If it's a fun game, it's a fun game.
Genres should not like bind us as heavily as the truly like insufferable roguelike community. Like,
it can be extreme.
Yeah, not that everyone in that community is like being super nitpicky or whatever. It's just like a small portion of people who are taking this idea of genre too literally, and they'll probably skewer me on Twitter. And you can do that if you go to twitter.com/realkevincole.
Yeah, it's just like, again, games, they can be serious, but you don't need to take that aspect of it so seriously, in my opinion. It's not worth the energy to put into it. Like, just spend the energy on playing a cool game instead.
Yeah,
or telling someone about a cool, like, I'm always of the mindset of like, there's so many good, cool, fun games out there. I'm never going to waste my time like bad-mouthing another game. Like, I might nitpick it, or, I'm not like going to glow, rave review everything we talk about on the podcast or whatever. I'm going to have my gripes, but at the end of the day, if I'm not enjoying a game I'm playing, I'm just going to move on to the next game. I'm not going to sit there and bitch about it and tell everyone that they shouldn't play that game. Just seems crazy to me.
I think these days too, like, you can tell more, at least I can tell more if I'm going to enjoy a game if I know like the person making it, and like a little bit about like how it was made. Like, is it totally indie? Is it a single team? Is it like a one-man team or a one-person team? Is like how was it made? Like, that'll tell me more about if I'm going to enjoy the game than it's a roguelike, it's a shooter, it's a first-person shooter. Because like, we're there. Like, there's more than one type of first-person shooter. There's more than one type of roguelike. The getting has never been gooder for video game genres. There's so much good stuff out there. But if I know a little bit about the story behind the game, I'm probably going to enjoy the game more, if that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense. Like, even for example, like we talked about last week, Go Go Pogo Girl, like following the development and the progress and seeing that go from like kind of a more Master System inspired game to now being like a Genesis inspired game. And like, just seeing the evolution of that was just like, oh man. And like seeing seeing OSAD or Ando get super excited about like, hey, I'm taking this game to the next level. Like I'm going to properly release like my first Steam game. And it's like, oh man, like I already would have gravitated towards this game just because it's my kind of game. But then knowing like that excitement that he has for it and the passion, it's like, yeah, I'm just like, you can feel it, especially if you kind of feel like you tangentially know the person a little bit.
Exactly. And I'm not saying everyone should develop a parasocial relationship with game devs, like, but I am just saying, like, you know, more transparency and like humanizing the people who work on stuff, especially when it comes to like discussions about like labor unions in game dev space. Like, I think too often devs are reduced to like I don't know, like pieces of a machine, like pieces of the factory or whatever. And like, we're people, we put our personal touches on things. And if you know that, I think one, you'll look at games a little more charitably, and two, you'll enjoy them more because you'll have a personal connection to the product.
Yeah. And I still, it blows my mind when I see people going like, I beat this game in 2 hours, I'm going to refund it. I'm like, what like, it cost you less than a movie ticket that would be like an hour and a half, and you're going to see the new Marvel movie in 3D and for like $25 a ticket. It's crazy, you know? It's like you can't pay $10 for a lek head. Come on.
I mean, people should absolutely pay whatever they're asking for a lek head.
Yes. I was shocked that it was only $10. No matter how short it is, so polished.
Shocked.
I totally missed that. I was the way you pointed at the screen. I was like, "Oh shit! Did our audio mess up or something?"
You have a knack for doing the perfect electricity pun in the lek head proximity, and it gets me every time.
Oh man! Apparently, I'm a comedian or an idiot, one or the other. Oh, but that's super exciting. I really, really can't wait to see it. And one more question, actually.
Sure.
Because so I know Super Try has like that little symbol between Super and Try.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what is that little symbol called? It's kind of like almost like an ellipses, but the middle period is like a little bit raised above the...
Yeah, that is the symbol of logical consequence.
Okay.
So people call it the therefore sign. So if you're like... if you're like doing like classic logic stuff, you're like, people like dogs. Kevin is a person, therefore Kevin likes dogs. Like,
I see. Yeah.
It's used in like logical philosophy, but it's also like it to me it represents like the if then statements that programming is based on.
Okay.
The name Super Try I came up with when I was like maybe like 14 or 15.
It kind of has that energy to it. Yeah. It's in the best way. Like it feels like it's just like, I want to make a game company and I'm going to call it Super Try.
Yeah, Super Try is, I feel like it encapsulates this sort of more energy than sense sort of philosophy that I like to bring to the games. Like, you know, a lot of people take it as like a marker of these games are difficult and you're going to have to super try to beat them. But that's not really where it came from. It just kind of came from like a youthful enthusiasm that I thought.
That's how it feels to me too. And especially even with that like opening splash screen, you know, and like the little like, you know, ping or ding or whatever. It's so perfect. It's such... every time I boot up one of your games, it gives me that feeling of just like, yes, I'm in for a treat.
Yeah. And I know it's kind of... I don't know. I feel like the splash screen, like if no one knows what the hell your game is about, like it has that like welcome to my video like YouTube quality to it.
Yeah.
But like I don't know. I love the fact that, you know, I make games and like I have a little game company logo. Like
I love when I see it. It feels so like official to me. I'm like, yes, this is like I'm here. Like this dev thought of everything. That's like my first thought is just like, okay, they thought of every detail in this game.
Yeah, I think if you're proud enough of your game to put that little like logo splash screen on it, then the people you want to pick up on that enthusiasm will pick up on that enthusiasm. And yeah, that's sort of what the Super Try thing is about. Is it's the little like therefore thing was back in college, like I took a lot of philosophy classes. My major, I was a rhetoric major. I was so arguing and logic and philosophy and stuff. That's what I got my degree in, and then I became a programmer, and I'm like, oh, there's some like minor parallels between that. So the therefore sign is just like kind of a little throwback to my degree.
Nice. That's really cool. I like that there's like even some meaning behind that. You know, even the little thing that I thought in my head, just, oh, that just looks cool.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And then, most people just think it's a square Triforce or whatever.
Even the colors you picked, it's like kind of just like the primary colors, but definitely more of like a magenta, and like it, they just have like a little bit of a, again, it just has that like youthful energy to it. Something about it. It jumps off the screen a little bit.
Yeah. I really wish, I wish it was like a little bit better thought out, because it was kind of just, I'm flying by the seat of my pants. Because things happened really fast for me in 2013. Like, I got angry, and then one of my coworkers told me that I had just quit my job. They had to explain to me that I just quit my job, and I was like, oh yeah, I did say all those things. I did quit my job. Okay, well, I guess I better do something else, like make this video game I had been working on my free time. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to make a video game, I need a logo. So let's go with the old name for that I put on my Doom mods back when I was 15. So yeah, that's and then Super Try is just sort of like, yeah, that's what it became. This, whatever this is, it became this.
Well, I'm here for whatever it is now, and I'm definitely super excited to see what you got coming down the pipeline. Because I'm just gonna gush some more, but yeah, everything I've ever played of yours is just top notch, and I really am excited to like. Again, I'm not the biggest tabletop player, but I'm really kind of curious to like. I don't know. I've always been just like a little bit tempted to get into the D&D stuff, because I do have a lot of friends that do that stuff. So something that's like a little more. And again, like you're saying, that I have a little bit of a connection to. I don't have any connection to Dungeons and Dragons, but I do have like, hey, Kevin made this. Like, I'm curious to just see what's going on with it. So I don't know. If I can talk some friends into checking it out, I hope I can, because I don't know. I miss board gaming.
Yeah. And we've been doing a lot of Space Kings via, Zoom and other like video chats, and it works pretty well, as well as it can. But hopefully, pandemic's going to ease up a little bit in the springtime, and around then, hopefully, if everything goes right, we'll have a tabletop game for everybody to play, and that'll be fun.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, I think we can probably wrap up the chat in here, so I don't take up any more of your time here today, Kevin. But again, Kevin's pretty much everywhere on the internet. Again, I'll have links in the episode description. But I mean, we didn't even talk about your Goosebuds podcast. Yeah. If you're a fan of Goosebumps at all, I know you've been kind of doing a lot of that as of late, it seems.
I have. Okay. If you want to hear me talk about Goosebumps books, for the last year, I've graduated from editor to editor host of the Goosebuds podcast, which you can find on any of your podcatcher apps by putting in Goosebuds. Me and my friends Chad and Paul talk about Goosebumps books. It's a silly time. There's lots of swears, and we try and sort of make sense of these stream of consciousness books that R.L. Stine wrote for children.
It's a really fun show, and especially I grew up kind of reading those books I was mentioning earlier, or at least admiring that. I would kind of like check them out at the library and flip through. I don't think I ever really read them all that much, but just kind of skim them and whatever and get the gist of the story. And there was a show too, right? Or no?
Yeah. We occasionally dip into episodes of the show, but I've also gotten the chance to like review some other like 90s adjacent stuff. Like we watched a few Pete and Pete episodes.
I think I listened to one of those. I remember listening to a Pete and Pete thing from you guys. Yeah,
which was an old Nickelodeon show that I absolutely adore. And they were like, and my fellow co-hosts were like, yeah, we can talk about that on Goosebuds. Why not?
Yeah, it fits.
Yeah, I also have a podcast called Pretend Friends, which already has 3 seasons on the old internet. Where if you're interested in Space Kings, go check out Pretend Friends. Again, it's on all the podcatcher device things.
I know. I never know what to say either.
Yeah. You can find it. You know how to type a thing in. Like you got it, guys. You can do it. Pretend Friends. I do that with my friends Paul, Nick, and Josh. It's a really good time. Maybe it's one of the best things I've ever made. We'll see. Yeah, we're gonna do a new season of that sometime soon. We've recorded a few episodes, but we're waiting on some editing and some assets. So I'm kind of
Awesome.
We'll have more of that soon. I also have a secret podcast on my Patreon. If you give me $1, you can listen to a podcast called Heart Cannon, where I talk to a couple of my friends who make art about something, a piece of art that really means something to them. And the idea is I'll research it and I'll play it if it's a game, I'll read it if it's a book, I'll listen to it if it's an album, and then we have like a deep conversation about it. And if you like podcasts where people talk about something enthusiastically, that's a good one. And that's on
sounds great. Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah. I'd love to have you on, by the way.
Oh, I'd love to come on. Yeah.
I just started plans for rebooting that podcast for my patrons. So that's coming back soon as well. You can find that and more of my stuff on my Patreon, which is at givekevinmoney.com.
I love it.
Yep. I'm on a lot of podcasts, so I needed something like simple and silly for my Patreon.
Yeah, it definitely, you remember it. As soon as you see it, you're like, yep, I'll remember that one.
But if you're not in the giving money stage of our friendship yet, I super get that. If you just want to give me a follow on Twitter, I'm on twitter.com/realkevincole or @realkevincole. If you could follow me there and maybe see if I'm still a cool person after you read my tweets, that helps me out a lot. And if you just want to play some video games, you can play almost all of my Super Try games for free in your browser at supertry.itch.io or supertrystudios.com.
Heck yeah. And I guess it's worth mentioning, too, that I'm sure if you're listening to this, there's a good chance you probably picked up that Itch.io bundle for racial justice and equality a couple years ago. Yeah. So Haque was included in there. So if you have somehow managed to not dig through all 8,000 of those games yet, I think it's worth digging into Haque. It was one of my favorites from that bundle. Although there are so many, it's hard to pick just one. But I really got sucked into that one.
Thanks so much, dude. Haque is also in the Palestinian Aid bundle. So if you got that bundle too, so
even better. Just to see, this is what I mean. Like, you feel like I can support the folks at Super Try. They're just good people. They're getting behind these good causes. Putting their work behind this important cause. Itch.io raised. I don't remember how much they raised for the Palestine bundle. But it was like $8 or $9 million.
It went very well.
Yeah, it just insane. When there's like these other huge. You didn't see Microsoft doing anything or Sony or any of these Nintendo, any of these big companies. So it's so cool to see like these small people like yourself who are, like you're not in a position to like really give your game away for free financially, but you're like, hey, you know what? I want to, because I care about this cause. And I just think it's so cool. It makes me feel extra good about buying games from anyone who included their stuff in any of those Itch.io bundles.
Yeah. And, I'd say if, I don't know if anyone who listens to this would be like on the fence about Itch, but I'd say don't underestimate Itch if you're a developer or just a gamer. Like, there's amazing stuff on that platform. That platform has the best interest of, I think, both players and devs in mind. I think Itch is not done growing yet. I think that's going to surprise us.
I totally agree. Yeah, especially with like how some of those bigger game jams like GMTK and Ludum Dare have really kind of taken off and kind of use Itch as like not so much Ludum Dare, but they kind of use it as like a hosting platform. Yeah. And I think those game jams are just going to grow and grow, especially as we see stuff like Head coming out of a game, like so many games that are like, oh, this started as a game jam idea, now it's a game you can buy.
Yeah.
I just think that's just going to get bigger and bigger. So I can't wait. I've found so many amazing devs, including yourself, and it's been quite a journey ever since picking up that bundle. I'm in a whole new gaming world, I feel.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Yeah. I think that's all my stuff. I'm sorry. Oh, and if you want to, if you're interested in this whole Space Kings thing and you want to know when that comes out, you can sign up at spacekings.space. That is all the stuff I have to plug. That's all my things. I'm sorry it was so much.
No, that just gets me more pumped. It's just like, man, you got so much passion, so many things cooking. yeah, can't recommend keeping track of everything Kevin Cole and the folks at Super Try are up to. But yeah, in the meantime, we will catch you all next week. Thanks again, Kevin, for taking so much time out of the day to chat with us for a couple episodes here. And yeah, thanks again, and take care, everybody.
Thanks so much for having me, Kevin. See you guys.
I'm always baffled by how it's not in sync when you're live, and I'm like, but how come it doesn't feel like there's that much lag? Like when we're talking, I never feel like I'm like, wait, like there's like a long gap for you to respond. It's like, it's so quick. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's a miracle any of this video stuff works, because I imagine the complexity behind it is mind-boggling.
Yeah. It's when I think about Discord especially, I'm like, how does this work? And this is just my one server that I'm on. Like, think about how many people have their own, and they're running streams and videos, and it's fucking crazy, man.
Yeah, man. Discord also started as a video game, but then they're like, we're just going to take the chat feature we wrote for it and use that instead.
It started as a game itself?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I knew it was a game like focused like platform, but I didn't know it started as a game.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
We have a visitor.
Oh, nice. What's her name? His name?
This is Houdini. She's
Houdini?
Yeah, she's just going to kind of hover over me for this.
That's an amazing cat name.
Yeah. I adopted her with that name. It wasn't my choice. It was
nice.
One of my old coworkers. His grandpa couldn't keep the cat, so I was like, I will take this lovely little miss.